So we've got a lot to cover around the basics for making babies. One thing you should know is that we usually don't say that we definitely never show pictures of babies at fertility because, to be honest, it can be quite triggering for people who are trying. Um, but actually, when we went to name this webinar, trying to conceive or preconception health or all of those words, actually they were so almost clinical. It felt removed from what the intention is, which is actually to make a baby. And so we just called it as it was, trying for a baby, because sometimes the process itself can become so medicalized that actually we lose sight of not what we're doing, but I guess the connection with our bodies that is needed for this journey. So I want to bring you back. I'll start by saying that I am an associate professor in reproductive and molecular genetics at University College London, where I'm based at the Institute for Women's Health. And I have spent the last 19 years in London looking at all of the most recent research on fertility, infertility, women's health, but specifically genetics as well, and early embryology. And from my perspective as a researcher, I remember being at conferences about IVF and embryology and thinking, how is it that we have, all of these technical examinations of the embryo and the culture fluid, and nobody's really asked what the parents were doing, what the mom and dad's health was like. And so it really set me on a mission to try and understand a lot more about the upstream determinants of health prior to IVF, and therefore that preconception journey. And so fertility was really built out of a mission to say what we'd hope is that nobody would ever need IVF. Surely there are many incidents where they do, but actually trying to just break down the barriers, because so much of infertility is unexplained. But actually, is it really that we're just not looking in the right places? So this one is just about looking at all of the information and research that we found in that preconception part, when you're trying for a baby, or even before you, better still, before you start trying for a baby, how to best prepare your body. And none of this is intended as medical advice. I am a scientist, not a clinician, and I'm here to just really break down some of the science and the most recent research around preconception health. Okay. So that's when we talk about what it takes to make a baby. Everyone says eggs, sperm, we have fertilization, and it happens typically in a uterus, or in IVF, it happens in the lab, and then it's transferred to the uterus. But actually, what does it really take to make a baby is a healthy egg, a healthy sperm, successful ovulation, successful fertilization, successful implantation, and a successful pregnancy, all of which are separate entities that we should really think about quite separately in order to get a successful pregnancy and outcome, which is a baby. And so actually many times in any journey, we overlook our reproductive health. We think of our reproductive health merely as being the eggs and the sperm coming together to fertilize, to make an embryo and a baby. But actually, when we look at the definition of reproductive health, nobody wants to hear definitions, but this is important because so often we separate out our mental health and our reproductive health. Our reproductive health is anything below the waist. Our mental health is anything in our head, but actually they're inextricably linked. Our mental health, our menstrual health, our hormone health are really tied together. And in many ways, it's kind of a chicken and egg is probably the worst analogy I could make, but chicken and egg, because when you suffer from poor mental health, it impacts your hormones. But equally, when your hormones are impacted and you are having pain or irregularity, that also affects your mental health. So both of them have roles to play in one another. But actually, we really can't separate out the roles that our physical health, our mental health, and our social well-being have on our reproductive health. So we have to think about all of the factors that are playing into our fertility when we're going on this journey, not just our physical health. But when we look at the preconception journey, the most overlooked step is always that healthy lifestyle and that preconception lifestyle that goes into this successful journey. So I'm going to just go through really where I think this journey investigation should start, not where it always has started, and that is with sperm health. And the reason I want to start with sperm health is that, and if you're in a same-sex relationship, we're coming to the rest of it, but sperm and the sperm tends to be vetted for high quality. If you're in a same-sex or a solo motherhood journey, then the sperm will have been checked through the fertility clinic. But in a heterosexual relationship, when you're talking about your partner's sperm is 50% of the equation. It is the smallest cell in the body compared to the egg, which is the biggest in the body, but it accounts for 50% of the DNA. And why I want to emphasize the importance of sperm health is that it is the easiest fix. When we're talking about sperm, the life cycle of a sperm, it has a life at this. You have spermatocytes or spermatogonial stem cells, and these little stem cells actually regenerate and have a 74-day lifespan, which is 2.5 months. So really taking 3 months before conception makes a massive difference to all of the different parameters that we look for when it comes to quality or a healthy sperm. So the reason I've listed some of these now for you is so that you can screenshot, look at it afterwards. If you end up on a journey, if you test your sperm, these are some of the terms that we're going to be looking for. That is quantity, the number of sperm per milliliter, which is on average 60 million sperm per milliliter. There are a lot of sperm in every ejaculate. So they're usually around 3 mils per ejaculate, depending on the number of days you've abstained. And the quantity is simply the number of sperm in that ejaculate. So that quantity isn't just a mere number. The number is more than just the number that we're looking for. We're looking for motility. In other words, there could be lots of sperm, but some of them could be dead. So we want them to be moving. But we don't want them to just be moving, because they could just be lying there twitching. And believe me, some of them really do just lie there twitching. When you look down at a sample of sperm, down the microscope, it's literally like looking at a subsection of society. There are some with 2 heads, some with 2 tails, and some are just twitching, some are just going round in circles, and then there are the rare few that are going and they're swimming right across the screen, and you know that they're going in the right direction. So that is motility, and you want progressive motility. In other words, you want them to be making a beeline for your queen, the egg. And then there's morphology. So that the head of that sperm should be nicely rounded, not in any strange shapes. So that's really when you're looking for the morphology, in other words, the shape. So all of these can be affected by lifestyle, nutrition, and environment, and making changes to your health can have a dramatic influence on all of those parameters. And the things that affect male fertility: age. Obviously, our fertility goes down when we age, and a lot of people think that they are immune to aging, that men are immune to aging, and they'll always quote these famous people who've had babies late in life. But actually, men accrue mutations, and they double the number of mutations that they have every 16 years. So as you can imagine, when you're 16 years old, you have a lower number of mutations than when you're 32, and then it gets here even higher as you're older. You have literally doubled and doubled and doubled your mutational rate. And so it actually can lead to difficulties. So the other things that impact male fertility: heat. The testicles are located outside the body for a reason. They hang outside the body just to keep them cool. So keeping them up tight in tight boxer shorts, tight jeans. If you are working in an environment that is close to the heat, they often talk about chefs whose balls are close to the heat. Or if you have your phone or laptop on your lap, none of those are good for you, including like saunas. All of those things should be given up by men before they conceive, because high temperature like that is actually really bad for your swimmers. And then obviously recreational drugs, smoking, pollution. There are genetic factors and medical conditions, but also weight and alcohol all affect male fertility. So if you're going to give up, you've only got 3 months really at a minimum to do it for, because your partner's going to have to do this for a lot longer. So at minimum of 9 months when that baby is there, 12 months if you include that preconception phase, and postnatally if she's going to be breastfeeding. So just, it's a small sacrifice to make. Now, all of these words are not somebody sitting on my keyboard. These are some of the definitions for low and no sperm count. So spermia is essentially the sperm. So when we say azoospermia, it means no sperm. Oligo is few sperm. As asthenozoospermia, poor motility. Teratozoospermia, abnormal motility. So all of these are essentially just there to guide you through some of the terms that you might hear if you get your sperm checked. Okay, I'll move on to nutrition and sperm health and what can be done even just alongside the abstinence from anything bad, but also supplementing with good things like a Mediterranean style diet has been shown to really increase sperm quality. So eating food like fish, shellfish, seafood, poultry, cereals, fruit and veg, low fat dairy, inconclusive results, but the rest of them, there's conclusive results to show an impact between these and better sperm. In fact, there are also foods that are not so good. Obviously, processed meat, soy foods aren't good, sugar sweetened beverages, full fat dairy, potatoes, random, I don't know. It's come from this paper, so we're going to back it up. Coffee and alcohol. But if you have, this is an amazing study I just found, that men who took just 75 grams, that's 2 handfuls of walnuts every day, resulted in improvements across all of the parameters of their sperm. So they increased their motility, morphology, and their concentration, so the number of sperm. And that's just from a handful of walnuts. So eat some nuts for your nuts, and they're really just full of great fatty acids to help sperm development. So that's if you do nothing else, that is something you can take away. Okay, so when I look at sperm health, it's important that we look at the kind of functional subunit of what is a sperm. Like, what is its energy source that keeps it swimming? So it's got this tail that makes it swim, and in underneath the head of the tail is where the mitochondria live, and they are essentially like the batteries of this sperm. And what they need are some micronutrients that are really important for healthy sperm health. So zinc is number one, and helps with sperm production, motility, and is lost in ejaculation. Folate is a strong antioxidant, so it's needed for synthesis of DNA. Vitamin C is an antioxidant. Vitamin E protects the lipid membrane. Selenium, which you 2 Brazil nuts a day is your selenium intake, so we need some walnuts and Brazil nuts. And then lycopene, which is in all of our tomatoes, is a free radical scavenger, so it gets rid of all those antioxidants, so great for motility. So people always ask me about supplements, but actually a big study has just come out saying that when you overdose on supplements, and like nothing annoys me more than seeing somebody with a handful of supplements and vitamins, and you're just thinking, no, don't take 5,000 IU of vitamin D, and then another multivitamin that's also got vitamin D, and then another thing that's got there's a lot of cross reaction that can happen when you take too many, and many of these have then overdosing on some of these antioxidants that you're taking. So actually a study that was carried out by a group by Professor John Aitken and his group showed that if you take excessive antioxidants in your supplements, you can cause damage. I know you say, but how much is too much, Helen? We don't actually ever recommend any. I don't personally recommend any supplements. That's not to say supplements aren't good. I don't endorse any. But if I were to embark on a journey, I would go with Fertility. They are renowned, serious scientists who've done a lot of work in this. So I can send any links afterwards. But just be aware of overdosing, and also polypharmacy, which is when you're taking too many of different things at the same time. Okay, lastly, I will say that there are some amazing studies now that are just coming out looking at paternal health before conception, which actually forms the placenta. So the DNA from the sperm is actually what's going to most likely contribute to the formation of the placenta. And so actually a higher paternal age is linked to increased risk of miscarriage, increased risk of preeclampsia, preterm birth, stillbirth, and altered birth weight. So sperm is very, very important in this journey. It's not just about helping like your future baby, but also the health of that pregnancy. So paternal smoking, obesity, poor diet, and chemical exposure before conception increases the risk of pregnancy loss and adverse perinatal outcomes. So this is quite a serious role that sperm is going to play, even in supporting the actual placenta to make the pregnancy. So I won't dwell too much on that, but I do want to say that it plays a vital role, and it's one that's been overlooked throughout history, where we always put the blame on the woman. Even the language that is used in the medical textbooks, she couldn't get pregnant, she lost the pregnancy. And actually now we can really start to look at some of the data that says that there are other factors at play, and it is not just the uterine environment or the egg. Okay, speaking of eggs, the history of eggs, I wanted to give a little bit of a history, because actually what's fascinating is that when we are pregnant, or when one is pregnant, and the fetus, if it's female, is inside you, she already has around 6 million eggs. And so it's hard to imagine that the egg of you was inside your grandmother, but it's true. And so when you're born, you have around 1 to 2 million. And every year as we age, obviously the number of eggs or declines over time. So the one thing that we know for a fact is that we are born with all the eggs we'll ever have, and that they decline over time. And what also declines over time, obviously, is the quality. Our eggs, given that they are inside us since we were in our grandmother's wombs, have actually a lot. Our whole lifestyle impacts them in ways. It's like that's why the most modifiable thing you can do in any pregnancy journey is look at the sperm, because at least that has the chance to regenerate over 3 months, whereas our eggs live with us, right? And poor egg and sperm quality are the most common cause of miscarriage. So hopefully, by just making small changes, we can actually really make a big difference to the health of our pregnancy as well as our baby, and actually improve our chances of getting pregnant. There is no test for egg quality. It's something that we're working at Fertility with. We got a grant to look at some of the cells that surround the egg to see if we can look for different signatures for quality. If anyone goes down an IVF journey and they want to donate their cumulus cells to us, they're discarded anyway. They're thrown in the bin, but let me know. And typically what we do to look at our actual eggs, how we test our eggs, is we measure a hormone called anti-Müllerian hormone, and that hormone is essentially secreted by every single follicle within your ovaries. So when we look at our ovaries, I have one here. This is an ovary. I love that I have this here. And essentially within it, you're seeing the different stages of an egg forming, right? So when we have our ovaries are filled with many of these immature ones, and the hormones that we have that help mature each of those then allow one to be released from the ovary. So the two measures that we can actually do to look at our egg count are, number one, to measure AMH, to look at the relative level of AMH that you have, and it gives you an indicator of how high or low your egg count is. But then also we can back that up with an AFC, which is called an antral follicle count, and that simply means you have a pelvic ultrasound scan and you count on the ultrasound how many you can see. So the things that have been linked to lower AMH: smoking, including vaping, and also lower vitamin D. Fun fact, during these winter dark months, we actually do see a suppression in our results. We see a lowered AMH, and it is because we need vitamin D actually to produce healthy eggs. So take your vitamin D, try get some sunshine in the mornings. It actually does make an impact on, and actually we see this interestingly in babies that are born in different months, because their mothers who got pregnant in winter were more likely to be vitamin D deficient. So we see different health states to pregnancies that occur at different times of the year, which I think is fascinating. Maybe our star signs are all right, and they're all linked to our nutritional deficiencies, right? This is why I'm such a Sagittarius. All right, so I mentioned that our ovarian reserve starts out quite high. We're born with all the eggs we'll ever have, and that this declines steadily over time. Truthfully, this is the graph that scared me into creating Fertility, because I remember being in my 30s thinking, oh my God, I'm about to flatline. But the reality is, actually, to get pregnant, you just need one egg. And so sometimes an AMH result can be super scary. And it's why we never ever test just AMH at Fertility. We measure all of your reproductive hormones: AMH, FSH, LH, estradiol. We measure your thyroid. We measure any additional hormones like your androgens. If we think you have it, you have a condition. And so that's really why it's important to take all of those, including your menstrual factors, into account, and not just one hormone result. But I just want to take a moment for our menstrual cycle, because really understanding your menstrual cycle is key to better understanding our overall fertility. And I say this through the lens of the frequency, of the timing, and of the different hormones that are at play here. So when we talk about our menstrual cycle, but anything between 28 and 35 days is considered normal and healthy. But really, if you're getting your period every 2 to 3 weeks, there's really something wrong here. There's something to do with your hormones that are actually not supporting a proper menstrual cycle. And so that one of the things to look out for when it comes to understanding whether your menstrual cycle is healthy is regularity. How regular are your menstrual cycles? How frequent are they? Are they too far apart, or are they too close together? Then the amount you bleed. So if you're bleeding too much, i.e. soaking through menstrual products every few hours, or you're bleeding too little and your period really only lasts like 1.5 to 2 days, then really it's something that I would investigate and check in on your hormones, because each of these hormones are incredibly powerful and are playing a beautiful role, but they're all dependent on each other for the next phase. Then I just want to talk about the different phases, because so many people will say to me that they're actively trying to conceive, and that they've been, they had sex last month, or they had sex wherever it is, and they're not timing when they're actually having sex to be when they ovulate. So really in the lead up to ovulation here, and on ovulation is the key time to be trying to have sex in your luteal phase, or earlier in your menstruation, or your early follicular phase, is really not going to lead to a pregnancy. You should be timing this to make sure that you're actually having sex when you ovulate, because that's the only time that egg is there and waiting to be fertilized. Okay. I want to talk about the gut microbiome, because it is the most overlooked part of our overall health. And actually, our gut and our gut microbes are so important for, yes, healthy digestion, but also our immunity, skin, brain function. And our gut is responsible for making vitamins, hormones, amino acids, and any of the chemical messengers that are required. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how really we feed our microbiome, and that is through fiber. And we are chronically lacking fiber in our diet. It is, I would say, one of the key components of a healthy gut microbiome, and therefore a healthy estrobolome, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So we can't break down dietary fiber during digestion, so it passes through the final part of our digestive tract, the large intestine, and then some types of fiber can be fermented and used to feed the gut bacteria. Think of your gut bacteria as needing to be fed every single day, because they are, when they are fed, that fermentation process, it produces really, really important what are called short chain fatty acids, and it produces butyric acid. It produces all of these essential byproducts that are essential for our immunity and metabolic health, lowering our cholesterol. But it also, obviously, it helps us poo. Everyone talks about fiber because it helps us poo, but there is so much more to what fiber is doing for us. And when you look at how much fiber you need, you should have about 30 grams of fiber a day, but most people get around 5. When you start to add up all the different things, like slice of brown bread, an avocado is good, even an apple, like actually listing all of the foods that you would be required to eat in a day in order to get your 30 grams of fiber. It's almost like a mission. I would challenge you to this mission to get your fiber. But it is really important to get a diverse microbiome and to feed that diverse microbiome. So some of the different foods, I'm going to just talk about some of the different foods that you can, obviously, quick changes like eating kefir, kombucha, kimchi. I've never been a fan of kimchi, but some people like it. Are vital in getting and increase diversity in your gut microbiome. But there are easier ways as well, like just eating some nuts and making sure you're eating plenty of different plant varieties, including coffee. This is just the whole 5 a day thing. Try and get as many as 10 a day if you can. The small changes make a big difference to your gut, and those changes happen over time. And the reason I say this is because our gut and our estrogen levels, and our gut bacteria and our estrogen levels, are inextricably linked. So this is what is called the estrobolome, and that is basically a group of gut microbes that control how estrogen is broken down, recycled, or cleared. Okay, and you want to be able to break down your estrogen. And if you can't properly break it down, you can get porosity, which is like leakiness between your gut, between this hormone and your reproductive organs. And so it's really important that we break down estrogen properly, and that it's done so when we are that it's done so properly through diverse gut health. So obviously estrogen is, I always call her our queen. She runs so much of our reproductive health, our physical health, our bone health, our brain health. But our estrogen levels affect our ovulation, our cycle regularity, and any estrogen driven conditions. So we can really support it by having a diverse microbiome, high fiber diet, a lot of fermented foods. Even if you just get your kefir in every morning, just slug it back. That's what I say, slug it back. You don't have to like it, but just feed your gut before you feed yourself. Okay, I shall move on to some of the micronutrients, in egg health, because I'm going to show you a video in a minute that was just the most profound video to me, because what it showed was the role of zinc in our egg and sperm health, and in actually the reaction when fertilization occurs. So just listing some of the micronutrients, how and why they're important for egg health first. So there's obviously vitamin D, which we've talked about, that regulates your AMH levels, your follicle development, so that's the egg development, and supports embryo implantation. Folate is a really amazing strong antioxidant that's needed for its synthesis of DNA and oocytes or eggs. And then iron is the most important thing that anyone can take in the world. That is the supplement I think every single woman should be on, is iron. We have really poor bioavailability, and iron is very poorly absorbed. So if you're taking an iron supplement, we're all aware that it makes us constipated. So take it every second day. If you can, take it on an empty tummy, especially if you're not planning on eating. So best, I think, probably last thing at night, take your iron and take it with a vitamin C, because vitamin C helps the absorption of that iron. But that iron is so important for not just ovulation, but in a pregnancy, to carry you throughout. Then there's our omegas and fatty acids for any inflammation and follicle development, and improves the membrane around the egg. And then everyone's talking about magnesium these days, to just, it has overall benefits, but supporting hormone regulation and the different egg parameters. Like in selenium, what did I mention? Selenium, top marks for anyone who's still listening. 2 Brazil nuts, maybe it's 4 Brazil nuts a day. Just eat some Brazil nuts every day for your selenium intake. So the question, should women be taking supplements? Yes, you should probably be taking multivitamins to get pregnant. But again, I would caution the use of many of them. There are some well-established big names, and their supplements are just full of anti-caking agents. So just please look on the back, read the ingredients for them. They shouldn't be full of loads of different excess things that are not needed. I have to be careful what I say in case anyone comes after me, but really trying. I have a food first approach to many of these different things. Here, right, watch this video. This is the moment the sperm hits the egg, and what you're going to see is this inorganic signature of the egg being actually fertilized. Watch this flash. And that is zinc showing you the actual level that it undergoes at the moment of fertilization, which is just an incredible thing. You're going to watch it all over again, because I like to nerd out on these things. But when you look at the role of a simple micronutrient, boom, fertilization just occurred. That egg has been fertilized. The sperm is in the hood, and babies are going to be made. But to me, that just shows you just how important one thing that we could all be very deficient in could have such an important role to give the strength behind that fertilization. So sometimes I just like to demonstrate these things because we can so easily list off the things and their associations, but when you see it in action, then you say, my God, I had no idea and that I needed this. I've mentioned how iron is really, really important to everyone, and around 30% of women are iron deficient. The textbooks say around 25%, but truthfully, the majority of women with iron deficiency just don't know that they are iron deficient, so that it goes undiagnosed. And some of the symptoms are fatigue, low mood, hair thinning, shortness of breath and dizziness, heavy periods. If you're getting heavy periods, the chances are you're anemic because you're losing so much blood every single month. And it's really needed for just so much of our bodily functions, our bone health, our mental health, our physical health. Women are the most iron deficient group in the UK. And so a low iron can reduce our ovulation frequency and affect egg quality because of poor oxygenation. So top food sources are lentil, spinach, red meat. Just suck it up and eat it. If you don't like it. I now sneak lentils into everything. Like get a nice lasagna, throw some lentils in there. I'm not a nutritionist, so don't take my, and I'm definitely not a chef, so don't take my cooking advice, but try and sneak those lentils into everything you eat. Just to get your iron in, and then take a supplement as well. And remember what I say, only every second day. Okay, moving on because we've got lots to cover still. I'm determined to get through this with the people who are here. So just want to take a moment for PCOS because all of this advice still stands for anyone who has PCOS, but you will have irregular periods, hyperandrogenism, which means higher levels of testosterone, and when we look at your ovaries on a scan, what you're going to see is lots of these follicles. That's where it gets its name from, is polycystic. Isn't that you have lots of cysts, it's really that the appearance, it looks like cysts on a scan. And those are really just lots of immature follicles. Interestingly, the study that we're doing looking at the cumulus cells, which surround the egg, we're comparing PCOS eggs to non-PCOS eggs because sometimes in a fertility journey you can get a lot of eggs from a PCOS patient, but they're not necessarily of better quality. So we wanted to just compare the two. And so some of the signs of PCOS, and again, you can get a diagnosis of PCOS through Fertility and our test, because we will test your androgens and your AMH and all of the other markers. But some of the signs are hair thinning and loss, acne, excess facial hair, or just hair in general, weight gain, irregular periods, or trouble conceiving, or when you don't really have regular periods. If your periods are not regular, actually we only need 2 out of 3 of these to get you closer to a clinical diagnosis. So it's worth checking in because it will impact your journey in terms of conception, because you're not going to be able to time your conception in the same way. So a period is generally a good indicator of ovulation. So but that rule doesn't really apply when it comes to PCOS, because you have what's called anovulatory cycles, which can mean that you actually don't know whether you've ovulated or you may not have ovulated. So it's down to too much testosterone and luteinizing hormone, and basically the high levels of these interrupt the development of the follicle, which means you keep getting all of these follicles, but they don't get to the stage of development that can mature and and ovulation can occur. Now, obviously, there are medical ways that you can induce ovulation through ovulation induction, and that's taking tablets to essentially make sure that you ovulate. Comes with some risks, is that you would ovulate more than one egg and therefore might get pregnant with twins or triplets or more. But there are also some dietary ways. The largest study of its kind, saw that 70% of people who changed made at least 5 lifestyle changes, were able to regain normal ovulation. So really just going back to the Mediterranean diet, making sure your weight is under control. And again, it's not as easy as that, but there are other medications as well that you can be prescribed for PCOS. So we have a full PCOS expert team, so please let me know if you need any help with that. Again, when you have PCOS, it's actually important to take into account the higher levels of testosterone or androgen levels, because they can affect your insulin levels. So, and the higher levels of those testosterone can actually impact then your sensitivity to insulin. So to manage those blood sugar levels and reduce potential insulin resistance, low glycemic index, carbohydrates, regular meals during the day, balanced meals, consuming omega-rich foods, lots of fruit and veg, lots of protein, and regular movement to manage stress and good quality of sleep. Again, not any of these are unique necessarily to PCOS, but it's important to remember that lower glycemic index carbohydrates will help reduce insulin spikes. Okay, and then I'm going to talk about endometriosis, because both of these conditions affect our fertility, and anyone going through this journey is obviously going to wonder, if they're not conceiving or they're trying to conceive, whether things should be different. So endometriosis is now becoming finally recognized as a well-known condition, as opposed to before. But when we started this, nobody knew what it was. Definitely couldn't pronounce it, and it is a chronic debilitating pain related condition, which is actually both cyclical and non-cyclical. So it occurs when cells that are similar to the lining of your womb are produced elsewhere. And there are many different theories behind why or how this occurs. But most importantly, it's really just one that has not gotten enough research to understand really what can be done for it, because of the link with hormones. Obviously, sometimes going on hormonal contraception can help individuals with the cyclical manner of pain. But if you're on a preconception journey, obviously you're going to want to be coming off your form of contraception. So it can be quite daunting for individuals who have endometriosis and are managing their symptoms through hormonal contraception that have to come off it. It's really important that you check in on your pelvic anatomy, look out for any endometriomas, blockages of the fallopian tubes, and just to have an overall look at your reproductive organs and just the environment around the reproductive organs, especially if you're experiencing pain. One of the biggest indicators is pain during poos. So it's again, if you want to book in with our team or talk to anyone through our team, we can give you some of the options. But I wanted to again look at some of the nutritional information given between endometriosis and nutrition, because a lot is coming out now about taking about a really low inflammatory diet. So following a Mediterranean diet is almost the most published results on which type of diet is best for us in general, in terms of cardiovascular health, in terms of our metabolic health. But again, following a Mediterranean diet, consuming a lot of fiber, making sure you have a low FODMAP diet, consider going gluten-free but only under a dietitian, limiting caffeine intake, incorporating regular movement, managing stress, and getting good quality of sleep. And then I read recently this paper that soy consumption, actually increasing soy intake by 1 serving per week, was associated with an 8% lower risk of laparoscopically confirmed endometriosis. Again, this is just out 2 weeks ago, so I'm always looking for little modifiable day-to-day things that we can do that aren't necessarily overt medical, because many people are on wait lists for surgery or for laparoscopies. If you need a surgical route, we can help you. But this work was carried out at Harvard, and so I think we can rely on this study for sure. But increasing your soy intake by 1 serving per week is a pretty benign thing that I think anyone could do, just to reduce anything in terms of endometriosis in laparoscopy. Okay, so this is a paper that we just published, where we looked across preconception behaviors on 235,000 women. The reason I wanted to share it with you is that actually, when we look at the data for people, now bear with me on this is a busy slide, but what I'm essentially trying to say is, when you're trying to get pregnant, everyone says don't drink when you get pregnant, but please don't drink when you're trying to get pregnant. I know that's unfair, unfashionable, and probably unfavorable to say just don't do it. Everyone loves to say please do it in moderation, but the truth is, what moderation is is not clear to anyone. And so a far easier rule for 3 months, given that you're going to also have to follow this rule for the 9 months that you're pregnant, is to cut out alcohol altogether. And I say this because when we looked at our data, all anyone ever says is that AMH is going down, your egg reserve is going down. But there were around 600 women who tested twice with us and their AMH had gone up. We were like, these are an anomaly. What is it about them? And so we looked, what was it about them? And it was the fact that every one of them had given up alcohol. So, albeit that that's just 600 women, to me, that's a strong enough study to show that actually it is favorable to us to not drink alcohol if we want to help our chances of conceiving, especially given that it is not good for us anyway. And actually, given that so many people who are actively trying to conceive are still drinking alcohol, 50% of people. But when we look at the amount that people are drinking, around 4% who are actively trying to conceive are drinking over 14 units. So you're not supposed to drink more than 1 to 2 units of alcohol twice a week. And I was about to say I'm not here to lecture anyone, but I'm actually here just to lecture all of you. Just don't do it, okay? That's it. There you go. I've ruined your fun. It's Christmas and there are loads of non-alcoholic versions of things out there anyway. Okay. Good. It doesn't define you and it doesn't make you more fun. Nobody becomes more funny, or well, maybe they do become funnier. No, maybe not. Okay, I won't go there. Anyway, smoking and fertility. We looked at our data again, and actually, people who are active, 20% of women actively trying to conceive are smoking, and 22% are vaping. Now, vaping has become like a lollipop for adults, and it is highly addictive, highly accepted, and you don't have to go out to do it. You can sit inside and it's not going to make your furniture smell of smoke. But as a result, people are sitting, working from home, just vaping on their lollipop, and it is really not good. So given that there was no data on this, we looked at our data to see what impact does vaping have on your fertility. And I know these are all different bar charts, but what it essentially tells us is when we looked at data from nearly 40,000 women who vaped, even those who vaped occasionally saw that vaping significantly decreased their AMH. We want that to be high. It decreased their testosterone, their sex hormone binding globulin, and their thyroid stimulating hormones. So their TSH, SHBG, all of them were significantly reduced in vapors, even in those who were occasional vapors. So no vape, no grape, please and thank you. Right, drug use. I shouldn't have to mention drug use, but again, when we looked at our data, 7% of women who were actively trying to conceive were using recreational drugs, and 13% of people who are planning for babies in the future were using recreational drugs. And there are so many studies showing the links of the risks of cannabis and certainly any other drugs during preconception and during pregnancy. So please just don't do it. Okay, so given that 4% of those who are actively trying to conceive were consuming way more than the recommended dose, and 7% of women actively trying to conceive still use recreational drugs, and 20% of those actively trying to conceive were occasionally vaping, we definitely conclude that women need more robust guidance in their lifestyle choices. And therefore, for me, the term everything in moderation is harmful, not helpful. I think that we should have hard and fast rules about these things and data to inform why we should no longer do them. The last thing is this paper, which again, we looked at nearly 100,000 women just to see what else was affecting women's ability to conceive. And actually, when we look at one in 5 women who are planning to have a baby reported at least one pre-existing reproductive health condition. So ruling out whether you have a reproductive health condition is important, incredibly important. You may not think you do, but many of the symptoms are insidious, and many of the narratives mean that we tolerate pain and irregularity. That's why our test can screen for I've got the hiccups. Our test can screen for 18 different conditions related to reproductive health with 98 to 99% confidence, both precision and recall. That is an incredibly powerful way of checking in whether you have a reproductive pathology or any underlying hormone imbalance. So again, when it comes to what's regular and what's not, You might think, of course, I don't have a condition, or I would definitely know. But of the women we asked if they had regular cycles, 120,000 of them said, yeah, I have a regular cycle. And when we looked at how long their cycles were and how long their periods were, they have irregular, clinically defined irregular periods. So actually, a lot of people think that they have normal menstrual cycles and they don't, including a shocking number of 42% of women trying to conceive didn't know when they ovulated or when their fertile window was. The reason I say these isn't to, I guess, not make anyone feel embarrassed, but the shame should be on our education in school. We are not given the requisite education to equip us for a fertility journey. And so these are just some of the basics that we shouldn't overlook, but actually are really important, is understanding when you ovulate, whether your periods are regular, and whether you have an underlying condition that's getting in your way. I want to talk about stress, because when people say, don't get stressed, just don't think about it, it's very, very frustrating. But when we talk about stress, stress is one of the most chronic long-term conditions that actually affects us, because chronic stress raises our cortisol, which suppresses that brain ovary and testis signaling, which is called your hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. Fun. Not so fun is the stress that leads to reduced sperm parameters, ovulation issues. It literally suppresses our ovulation because we are highly wired to detect stress. And that is because our bodies need to be in some form of state of zen in order to, and healthiness, in order to have a pregnancy. If our body detects that we are stressed, from an evolutionary protective mechanism, the first thing that our body does as women is stop your periods. And it does so to protect you. Your body's goal is to keep you alive. And if it thinks that you are, over exercising, running, it's not differentiating between you exercising, training for a half marathon or full marathon if you're crazy enough. It's detecting that you're running away from something and that you are in danger and that you do not have the requisite nutrients to keep you alive. And therefore, it's definitely not going to divide any of those nutrients with a baby. And so understanding that over exercising and under eating is not good for our bodies, but also understanding that stress is like this very finely tuned evolutionary mechanism. And the example I always give with stress is and our hormones, and how it can be so difficult to understand where it's coming from, but also how potent it can be, is adrenaline, right? Some people chase an adrenaline kick. But think about adrenaline. When our body, our adrenal gland, produces adrenaline, what happens to our body? Our face goes red because our bloodstream, our veins have gotten larger to allow blood go all over our body. Our heart beats faster because our body is basically trying to get us prepared to get out of there. That is what adrenaline will literally do. It is going to get you moving away from where you are to put you in a safe place. It wants you to be faster. So you actually, if some people get a big fright, they will defecate, they can urinate, they can, essentially, because your body's trying to make you lighter to get out of there. And when I think about what are the triggers for that adrenaline kick, it can be visual. You can literally see someone you don't like, your ex, or anyone, and you get that feeling, and it's like a punch in the stomach. Your heart is racing. Imagine this multi-organ impact that one sight has given you. Or it could have been a loud bang, and you've gotten that same fright, and you'd have this multi-organ, all body experience that you're going through just because you saw or heard something. Even hearing someone's voice can give you this all over. So imagine being in an environment where you're perpetually in that state of stress. And so there are many negotiators, there are many, non-negotiators when it comes to stress, right? If your work environment is stressful, maybe try and work from home. But I definitely think if you're going to go through this journey, give yourself the best possible chance. And that is if there are any negotiable stressors, like even if it means not seeing the people that stress you out for a few weeks, to it. Okay, I will not talk about stress anymore, other than the fact that stress is actually scientifically linked with our fertility, and so trying to remove that is really important where possible. Okay, it's definitely not the only thing, and I'm definitely not telling you to not think about it. I'm just trying to tell you there's a science behind it, and please try and remove anyone who's toxic to you. Okay, so today we've spoken about how to prepare your body for pregnancy. So really looking at nutrition, some of the lifestyle factors, ways to improve your sleep. I think really checking in on your hormones is like the first step for me. Checking in that there's nothing causing any of these things is a really important aspect. But making sure that we're getting enough sleep and trying to remove as much stress as possible are things that actually are harder than they seem, even though they should be the easier one. But our sleep hygiene, everyone is guilty of a midnight doom scroll, especially during, what is it, Cyber Monday. I'm grateful that you're with me and not on whatever website you should be on looking for something in the sales. But a much better investment, definitely, than any sale would be checking in on your overall health and your hormones. And I think timing is key, making sure that you are starting on your preconception journey as soon as possible, even if it's not Christmas, fine. If you want to have your mince pies and your mulled wine and you want to start in January, but get yourself your test, get yourself ready for your next period. Check your hormones on the third day of your menstrual cycle. We test on day 3. On Wednesdays we bleed. And so then you feel that you're confident, because I cannot tell you the importance that confidence can give you in going into a conception journey, knowing that actually you are doing everything that you can to prepare your body, and your partner, if you have one, is also going to be doing the same. So when we look at ovulation, eggs have been growing for around 90 days beforehand. So we've got 90 days for eggs, 72 days for sperm. Start together and give yourselves 3 months prior to doing that for trying for a baby. I am obviously an hour late, or 15 minutes late, because we started 15 minutes late. I just want to thank everyone for joining me. I can't actually see the screen for who has joined in the end, but I'm very grateful for anyone who has, given all of the technical difficulties we had with the link. So somebody's asked about taking folic acid. There is a brand called Impril. Again, I'm not paid, I have no associations with them whatsoever, but other than that, I know that they are a quality folic acid, and yes, you should take it around 3 months before getting pregnant. I hope we can send you all, if anyone has any other questions, I hope we can get through some of them now, or equally in an email we can cover any, if any have been sent through. Can I apologize to anyone about the lateness of this webinar and our technical difficulties, but I cracked on in the end. And thanks for the early joiners, because you really bared with me. Right. Thank you. You will get copies of, yes, you can have copies. There'll be a link with the recording that will go up. But if you want the copies of the slides, just reply to the email that you get with the webinar recording and say, Helen told me she could have the slides. Ordinarily we don't share, but I understand that tonight I owe you all. I know I owe you all for the difficulty. Somebody's asked, what's the top thing to prioritize when trying to get pregnant? There's a fertility specialist called Zita West, and she describes HUG, right? And HUG stands for heart, uterus, and gut. And so we often focus on your uterine health and your hormones, but actually your heart is where your head is at. So I think really looking to each of those things. I've already mentioned a lot about your gut health, but I do think that also thinking about your mental health to get you through that journey is really important too. So I'm trying to think. There's a lot of questions going through here now. How does the fertility test work? we actually have a very robust screening tool. So we took into account all of the international diagnostic criteria for all of the different conditions, anything relating to ovulation, and we embedded them within a weighted algorithm into our health assessment so that we can really go through and ask you all of the relevant questions relevant to your health, and then assign an important panel of hormones for you, and that will help us to determine what is going on. We're the only company that will actually give you an analysis of your hormones and your lifestyle factors in the context of your health and everything you've told us. And then you have full access to our fertility advisors. Any scan that you might need, you can book same day ultrasound scans. And given that there is a wait list of 700,000 women to see a gynecologist on the NHS, it at least circumvents that. And so we are really, really proud of some of the stories that people have shared with us with their fertility hatchlings, because they were able to get answers and prescriptions should they need it, even for a thyroid condition, when they were not able to get it through their GP. Please do email if you have any questions. We'll come back to everyone, I promise you. And if you have any interest in doing follow-on speciality webinars, just let me know. Send an email as well. We like a reply to any of the info emails, so just let me know. And thank you for joining me, and I will wish you all luck. I wish I had all of your I get personal with people. I wish you all luck on your pregnancy journeys, and we're here for any support should you need it. Thank you.